Jennifer Kesse's car was found 2 days after she disappeared. It was parked at an apartment complex roughly a mile from the condominium where she lived, and surveillance footage showed a person leaving the car behind. But Jennifer was nowhere to be found. That image would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in a disappearance that has remained unresolved for more than 2 decades. On January 24, 2006, Jennifer Joyce Kesse was reported missing from Orlando, Florida. She was 24 years old. Her workplace had expected her that morning, but she never arrived. Family members became concerned, and the search for her began. 2 days later, on January 26, Jennifer's black Chevrolet Malibu was found abandoned at Huntington on the Green, an apartment complex about a mile from her home. The vehicle itself was an answer to one question: where had Jennifer's car gone? But it immediately created another. Who had driven it there? Surveillance footage from the complex captured a person parking Jennifer's car and walking away. The FBI describes that individual as a person of interest in Jennifer's disappearance. More than 20 years later, that person has never been publicly identified or arrested in connection with Jennifer's disappearance. Before we go further, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Jennifer disappeared in Orlando, and someone watching this may know the area, remember the case, or simply understand how important it is that her name remains visible. To understand why that abandoned car matters so much, we have to go back to Jennifer herself. Jennifer Kesse was 24 years old when she disappeared. She was a University of Central Florida graduate and was working for Westgate Resorts in Ocoee, Florida. She lived in Orlando at the Mosaic at Millenia condominium complex near the mall at Millenia. The official missing person information describes Jennifer as 5 feet 7 inches tall, approximately 130 pounds, with sandy blonde hair and green eyes. She had a quarter-sized shamrock tattoo on her left hip and a surgical scar on the inside of her left elbow. Those details may seem ordinary, but in a missing person investigation, ordinary details become important. They are the information investigators use to distinguish one person from another, to identify potential sightings, and to keep a case active over time. Jennifer was also living what appeared to be the life of a young professional building her future in Central Florida. And then, on January 24, 2006, that life stopped. The night before her disappearance, Jennifer spoke with people close to her. According to reporting from the time, she spoke with her father, mother, brother, friends, and boyfriend. Her boyfriend, Rob Allen, lived in Fort Lauderdale. Jennifer had also recently returned from a trip to St. Croix with her boyfriend and friends. At approximately 10 p.m. on January 23rd, Jennifer spoke with her boyfriend by phone from her condominium. That conversation would become significant because it was among the last known contacts anyone had with her. The next morning, Jennifer was expected at work. She didn't arrive. Her workplace notified her family, and Jennifer was reported missing on January 24th. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement's current case information confirms that she did not report to work and did not answer or return calls from family or friends. There was something else investigators had to consider. Jennifer's disappearance did not appear to be a simple decision to walk away from her life. The FBI's current VICAP information says that several items were missing from Jennifer's residence, including her keys, Florida driver's license, purse, an iPod, and 2 cell phones. The circumstances were serious enough that investigators treated the disappearance as suspicious. Now that you know who Jennifer Kesse was, does she remind you of someone you know? A daughter, sister, friend, or coworker? Tell me in the comments. Keeping Jennifer's story human matters, because she was a person before she became a missing person case. The investigation quickly centered on one crucial question: what happened between Jennifer leaving her condominium and the discovery of her car? The problem was that investigators did not have a clear answer. Jennifer's vehicle was eventually located at Huntington on the Green, approximately 1 mile from her condominium. According to the FBI, the car was found after Jennifer had already been reported missing. And the car did not simply appear there. Surveillance footage showed a person parking Jennifer's 2004 Chevrolet Malibu at the apartment complex and then walking away. That footage became one of the most recognizable pieces of evidence in the entire case. But it was also frustratingly limited. The available surveillance image was grainy. The person could be seen near the vehicle, but the quality of the recording made identification difficult. Contemporary reporting described the person as appearing to be a man in workman-type clothing, although the official FBI description uses the more cautious term, person of interest. That distinction matters. There has never been a public identification of that person as Jennifer's abductor, and no one has been convicted in connection with her disappearance. So the responsible way to describe the evidence is simple. Investigators want to identify the person shown in the surveillance footage because that individual may have information about what happened to Jennifer. The footage does not, by itself, establish who that person was or what happened to Jennifer. What it does establish is that someone moved Jennifer's car, and that someone left the vehicle behind. Another detail made the abandoned car even more important. According to reporting from the investigation, valuables were still inside the vehicle. That led investigators to believe the disappearance was not simply a robbery or carjacking. The car therefore became something more than transportation. It became a potential evidence container. Over the years, investigators examined evidence associated with the vehicle and the disappearance. But the investigation did not produce the answer Jennifer's family wanted. Instead, time began to work against them. Days became months, months became years, and years became decades. Jennifer's parents, Drew and Joyce Kesse, continued searching for answers. Their efforts became a major part of the public story surrounding the case. They did not simply wait for the investigation to resolve itself. They pushed for information. They worked with investigators. They sought access to records. And eventually, disagreements between the family and the Orlando Police Department became public. In 2022, Drew Kesse criticized the Orlando Police Department's handling of the case and the process surrounding the release of investigative records. Orlando police responded that the department remained committed to finding answers and said it had turned over thousands of pages of documents and hours of recordings to the family's independent team. The dispute was significant because the Kesse family believed a fresh examination of the evidence could uncover something that had been missed. That belief would eventually help lead the case in a new direction. Investigators had Jennifer's car, surveillance footage, and years of investigative material, but the trail still went cold. What do you think happened between Jennifer's disappearance and the moment her car was abandoned? If you have a theory, keep it grounded in the evidence and share it in the comments. For years, the case remained one of the most closely followed missing person investigations in Florida. Searches were conducted. Leads were pursued. Information was reviewed. But Jennifer was not found, and the person captured in the surveillance footage remained unidentified. There is a particular cruelty in a case like this. There is evidence that something happened. There is evidence that someone moved Jennifer's car. There is evidence that investigators can point to and say, this matters. But evidence is only useful if it can lead investigators to a person, a place, or an answer. For Jennifer's family, the central question never changed. Where is Jennifer? The years also brought changes in technology. Surveillance video that once seemed impossible to improve could potentially be processed using modern digital techniques. DNA evidence could be re-examined using newer laboratory methods. Investigators could revisit old records with tools that did not exist in 2006. And that possibility became especially important when the case moved to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. In November 2022, Foodle assumed the lead investigative role in Jennifer's case. This was not simply a change of agency name. It represented a fresh examination of a case that had already consumed years of investigative effort. FDLE says its agents have followed up on every new lead and gathered additional information that may help locate Jennifer. By January 2026, the agency said it had conducted more than 115 interviews, reviewed tens of thousands of documents and pieces of evidence from the Orlando Police Department, and spent thousands of hours re-examining the earlier investigation. That statement is important because it shows the case is not simply sitting untouched in an archive. Investigators are still working it. They are still examining evidence. They are still interviewing people. And they are still trying to locate Jennifer. We are about to reach the most recent chapter of this investigation. Before you continue, what do you think could finally crack a case like Jennifer's after 20 years? DNA, surveillance technology, a witness, or something investigators haven't seen yet? Make your prediction before we get there. By 2025 and 2026, new attention was being placed on forensic evidence. Jennifer's father said investigators were retesting DNA associated with evidence from the case. He also discussed evidence that had not previously been tested and expressed hope that advances in technology could produce information that had not been available in 2006. That does not mean a DNA match has solved the case. It has not. As of January 2026, Jennifer had still not been found, and FDLE continued to investigate the disappearance. But the possibility of extracting new information from old evidence matters. Forensic science has changed dramatically since 2006. DNA analysis can now examine extremely small biological samples. Video enhancement technology can improve the usable quality of surveillance material while preserving evidentiary integrity. FDLE itself describes video enhancement as a forensic process used to recover and clarify surveillance images and videos connected to investigations. And Jennifer's case contains both forms of evidence. There is biological evidence being reconsidered. And there is surveillance footage that has remained frustratingly difficult to interpret. The combination creates one of the most important questions in the case. Could technology finally turn old evidence into a new lead? That is what investigators are hoping. The family has also expressed renewed confidence in the current investigation. In January 2026, FDLE publicly said its primary focus remained finding Jennifer and bringing justice in the case. The agency said its agents were methodically pursuing leads, analyzing evidence, and conducting interviews. Those words are important because after 20 years, a missing person investigation can easily become something the public assumes has been forgotten. Jennifer's case has not been forgotten. It is still classified by FD as a cold case, and the agency continues to list Jennifer as missing. The official information remains clear about one thing: Jennifer has not been located. There is no confirmed public account explaining where she went after January 24, 2006. There is no publicly identified person responsible for her disappearance. And there is no conviction. That means every theory has to be treated carefully. There are theories about who might have been involved. There are theories about the person captured on surveillance. There are theories about how Jennifer's car traveled from her condominium to Huntington on the Green. But theories are not evidence. And after 20 years, the distinction matters more than ever. The responsible story is not that we know what happened. We don't. The responsible story is that Jennifer disappeared. Her vehicle was moved. Surveillance captured a person of interest. And investigators have never been able to establish publicly what happened to her afterward. That uncertainty is exactly what makes this case so difficult. Jennifer's car gives investigators a physical location. The surveillance footage gives them a person they want to identify. The forensic evidence may offer another path. But Jennifer herself remains missing. For her parents, that means the case has never truly ended. In 2026, FDLE publicly thanked Drew and Joyce Kesse for their continued efforts and said the agency was working to bring answers to Jennifer's parents and loved ones. Her parents expressed gratitude for the work of the current investigators and said the new approach had brought hope that Jennifer could still be found and brought home. That hope has survived for 20 years. And there is another part of Jennifer's story that extends beyond the investigation itself. Her disappearance helped change how Florida handled missing adults. FDLE has explained that when Jennifer Kesse and Tiffany Sessions disappeared as young adults, Florida's missing children system did not cover adults in the same way. Jennifer's parents and others advocated for legislative changes. In 2008, the Jennifer Kesse-Tiffany Sessions Missing Persons Act expanded the state's missing person information system to include young adults ages 18 to 25. So Jennifer's name became connected not only to an unsolved disappearance, but also to a change in how Florida approached missing young adults. That is part of her legacy. But it is not the ending her family wants. Because legislation cannot bring Jennifer home. A new database cannot bring Jennifer home. A surveillance enhancement cannot bring Jennifer home unless it leads somewhere. And a DNA result matters only if it helps answer the fundamental question that has remained unanswered since January 2006. Where is Jennifer Kesse? 2 decades after she disappeared, investigators are still asking that question. They are examining old evidence with new technology. They are interviewing people. They are reviewing tens of thousands of documents and pieces of evidence. And they continue to ask the public for information. The FDLE says anyone with information about Jennifer's disappearance can contact the FDLE Orlando office at 407-245-0888 or email oroccoldcasetips@fdle.state.eecep.us. The FBI also continues to maintain Jennifer's VICAP missing person information, including the surveillance image of the person of interest. For anyone who remembers something from 2006, something they saw, heard, or were told, 20 years does not necessarily make that information irrelevant. Sometimes memories change. Sometimes people move. Sometimes circumstances change. And sometimes information that seemed insignificant years ago becomes important when investigators look at a case again. That is why Jennifer's disappearance remains active. Her family has continued to search. Investigators continue to work. And the question that began on a January morning in Orlando remains unanswered. Jennifer was 24 when she disappeared. Today, she would be 45. FDLE continues to list her as missing. Her car was found. The surveillance footage was found. Evidence was collected. Records were preserved. Investigators have returned to the case. But Jennifer herself has not been found. And until that changes, the story of Jennifer Kesse cannot have a true ending. If you have information about Jennifer Kesse's disappearance, contact the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Orlando office at 407-245-0888 or OROCC's Cold Case Tips at fdle.state.fdle.ease.sfel.state. Every case deserves an answer. Every family deserves the truth.